Thank you, Destiny, and good morning. Good morning, New Jersey. It's great to be back here again, and I have to start by saying, you know, as kind of an arts guy, I was just blown away by these kids from the Foundation Academy, and Benjamin Dale, wherever you are, a big round of applause, and equally so by those kids from Charter Tech last night. This has been a really welcome experience for me. I'm a little humbled this morning to be on the bill with two other keynoters, my good friend Tom Block here and Cory Booker, who will be arriving shortly. And I do want to say that, you know, we have worked with this association and continue to, and I am tremendously impressed by the work that Destiny is doing, by the work that Deborah and the rest of the team are doing. We work with all of the state associations around the country. We have a state leaders council, and we do a lot of strategic planning and a lot of training and capacity building, as we call it. And I want to tell you, this is a place where all of that has really taken root, where Destiny and her board and her team have really taken the opportunity and run with it. So I want to start by complimenting the association and particularly Destiny for their leadership. Now, I'm not allowed to go back to the office today unless I actually begin with a shameless plug. As you've seen in the lobby there, we have a booth in which you can find information about the National Charter Schools Conference, which takes place this year in Washington, D.C. in June 21st through 24th. And, you know, it's a terrific experience. How many of you were in New Orleans for last year's conference? A few, okay? There's a geographical thing that goes on here. When we hold it in New Orleans, people say, oh, it's so long, it's such a trip to get to New Orleans. We had it in Albuquerque the year before, and the whole East Coast didn't show up. Well, this year, it's in Washington. You get on 95, and you literally stay on 95 until you come to the New York Avenue exit in D.C. You go off there, and it takes you right to the Washington Convention Center. So there are no excuses this year. You know, those of you who were there in either of the past 2 years know that this conference is not just, it's not just kind of the standard national conference. It's the whole family getting together, you know. Last year we had 3,200 people in New Orleans, and it's a wonderful experience to feel part of that, much as it is here today with your movement from your own state. But this is where you get to find out what the folks in California and Massachusetts and Texas are doing in their classrooms. And we also, for the educators in the room, we have a special teacher institute that the U.S. Department of Education is doing on best teacher practices the Sunday that kicks off the event. So we really hope you can do it. But it's more than just an opportunity for you. I'm asking you this because we need you there. We need you. We, the movement, need you. The other people who are going to be there need you. They need to hear about all the schools that have won the awards that were given out last night. They need to hear about the tremendous accomplishments that Destiny talked about this morning. They need to hear about the story that I heard last night that in one of the charter schools, not only did they graduate all their kids and all their kids go to college, but they track them and 85% of them have stayed in college. And I think it's particularly important for us to tell the story of what we used to call mom and pop charter schools. I don't know, for some reason that has become politically incorrect. I'm not sure why. We call them now freestanding or independent charters. But that 80% of the charter movement that is not affiliated with a network of any sort, an EMO or a CMO, and I think most people don't recognize that and recognize that within that 80% is the seedbed of the next generation of great charter schools. The next KIPP, the next Uncommon, all of those are in that 80%. And we have to make sure that it's possible to start a great school today and in the next decade. We need to make sure that the state legislature and the federal legislature understand that support for starting and sustaining a great independent charter school, whether they have plans to scale or not, is the essential juice that this movement needs. And it's really where we begin to make our contribution to the reform of broader education. One of the things that we're trying to do this year, as you look at the huge stimulus bill that was passed and which is shortly going to be making its way into the coffers of schools, is that we want to make sure that in the innovation portion of that there is some focus on finding innovation in the schools that are not affiliated and making sure that if somebody is doing a great thing in a classroom in New Jersey, that it has the opportunity to travel outside of its school, outside of its neighborhood, outside of its state, and across the country. So we're working in several respects on that. Number one, if any of you have been to our website recently, you know that we've been doing a lot of work on the stimulus bill. And if you haven't, I will say humbly that my colleagues have done a great job of getting all the latest data together in one place. And you can go to publiccharters.org, and you'll see a lot of things on the stimulus bill, both in terms of what monies are going to flow, what restrictions there are on them, what you can do and can't do with them. I won't belabor all of that. Go to the website. That's where it all is. I will say this, though. We have a thing in Washington that we call the Washington Post test. You know, before you think about spending a dollar, just make sure that it would look okay on the front page of the Washington Post or the Newark Star-Ledger or whatever. we have to be really, really responsible stewards of this money. But we also have to do something terrific with it. To give you an idea of what a magnitude of opportunity this presents, let me just take the one smallest component of this bill, the one smallest funding component for education, and that is the $650 million innovation fund that the Secretary will have. Jessica mentioned I used to be at the Department of Education. I was there in the 80s when Bill Bennett was Secretary. And the Democrats at that time were in high dudgeon because the Secretary of Education, who was of the other party, had discretionary control over $7 million. Well, Arne Duncan has $650 million to play with. And he has said that he wants to see the innovation in the charter sector replicated with at least a good chunk of that money. It won't all be charter school stuff. But we have an opportunity to show what we can do, what kind of tools we can develop, what kind of curricular innovations we can produce, what kind of ways we can use the day and the month and the year in terms of the use of time in schools, what we can do for kids who have to stay after school to learn a little bit faster to catch up with their peers. We have an opportunity to take that, and you can directly apply for that money in teams or with nonprofits or with LEAs. So think about that. Opportunity we have not had before. We have that opportunity in terms of money, but that's the least of it. We have an opportunity to tell the story of public charter schools, because after a decade and a half of kind of sitting around the margins and trying to get our foot under the tent and trying to get in the door, suddenly there we are. We have the President of the United States talking about us as public schools. We have a Secretary of Education who's committed to charter schools. And suddenly all around the country I see literally, this is true, politicians who a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago were voting against charter schools saying, well, you know, I'm reconsidering. And if that isn't an opportunity, I don't know what is. So when you come to Washington or when you go to the state capitol here and you talk about the issues that are of concern to you, finance equity, accountability, making sure that charters have a level playing field when it comes to things like facilities, just know that you have a national movement behind you, that we are wanting to work with you at every turn, and that you can enrich what we do by telling your story. So we hope to see you in a couple of months, and we hope to keep working with you on the ground and from here on forward. Thanks, and have a terrific conference.